You're listening to the God Life Culture Podcast, where faith
and what's trending collide. Welcome back to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are so excited to be back here at the God Life Culture Podcast. We just want to say thank you so much for tuning in for another episode, another week. It has been some time since our last episode. We released the last week of December, right? And we have just been preparing and gearing up and doing all of these things that, you know, those of you who are watching online are seeing. And we're just excited to get into the changes, the updates, and all the good stuff that has been happening. I mean, how are you feeling to be back here on the podcast?
I think overall the feeling is always excited to be able to just jump back into it and to discuss what's happening, what's trending, and also all the other like random topics that we come up with. If we have special guests, speaking with them. I do think that the idea of having now the visual element is great because it gives the audience and the people that listen to us the ability to also watch us, you know, which some people like that a lot more. You know, they listen to podcasts, but they're down for like watching a podcast and seeing all of that stuff, especially when we're like talking about something random and maybe like a gesture is happening, or we're like, you know, we're very animated with the way that we speak. So I think that people like that. But on the flip side, it is also nerve-wracking. The idea that now we're also having this whole visual element, because there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that people don't usually see, that now we have to be a little bit more conscious about. But I think it's also part of the culture of how we do things and our flavor, I guess. Really. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I'm super excited to be back. I definitely missed it. I think it's awesome, the changes and all the awesome things that we're incorporating as far as the visual elements. Like you said, I think people enjoy watching. They enjoy, you know, seeing, and that's a different way to connect. But like you said, with that comes a whole range of, you know, making sure that, you know, like you said, you're positioned the right way, that you look good, that you're not being too extra. You know, we do a lot of like hand gestures to each other, like, okay, wrap that up, or like, keep going. No, that's good. That's good. So all of those things, like you said, is a part of it. So I don't know. I'm very excited to be able to now reach, I think, a different set of people and group of people. You know, there are people that are visual, you know, individuals who rather watch something than just listen to something. Then there are those that just rather listen. So for all of you who have stuck it out with us all of these years, right? These 3 years that we've been podcasting simply just on audio, right? And listening to us, you know, thank you so much. And we're excited for all of you who will now listen and watch the video and the visual. And those of you who will just, you know, watch the visual, we're definitely excited for that. We're on YouTube, right? For those who are listening who may not know, if you YouTube God Life Culture Podcast, you will see some of our previous episodes from our guests are up there. And we're just excited to be bringing new content and new visuals and all of that to the God Life Culture podcast.
Just to be clear, our old episodes that are up on YouTube are strict. It's an audio file, really, with a little logo thing. But moving forward, now we'll be putting up, you know, our visual for our full episodes. We'll be throwing up reels on Instagram. We're throwing up clips and stuff. So we're going to be doing a lot more interactive stuff with the visuals, which, like I said before, is cool, is exciting, but it's also a little nerve-wracking. And, you know, I think one other thing is that we're also, last week we introduced a little like snippet that, you know, we have our pod room now happening and been working on it, and you guys can kind of see the things that we've been putting together, and it's still a work in progress. We're still working on spicing it up and adding our little, you know, flavor. I keep saying flavor. What's wrong with me today?
Listen.
To this room, and really making it our own, which I also think is part of the visual element with it too. Those are the things that you have to start to think of now as well. You know, when someone looks at your video, even with the cover art of the video, you know, is it going to be llamativo? Is it going to be something that's going to call their attention? Even the color is something that we thought of a lot, and we really like settled on it because we really enjoyed it. We thought it was different. We think, you know, you guys will like it as well. So those are all the little things that you'll see popping up. We may throw up something on a wall one day. We may not like how it looks, so we take it off on another day. You know, it's still a work in progress, and we, you know, want you guys to be patient with us. You know, it's good. I think it's good. It's exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's cool also because before this, we didn't have a designated space.
Oh,
so
yes.
I think it's cool to like also talk about that. We didn't have
true.
one space where we always recorded. It was either at our church, right, in different rooms in different places at our church, right? Then if we recorded separately, we were in our homes, you know, recording throughout the pandemic. We did a lot of recordings like that as well. You know, so now we have a space where we have designated this area to, you know, record and do all the things that we do, which just feels amazing.
Yeah, and I think we definitely have to give a shout out to our local church for trusting us and believing in us. And, you know, being really behind and supportive with the vision and what we've been doing as well. You know, we took up a space that's part of the church that could be used for something else. And they were very supportive from it from the beginning, you know, from the pastors to the elders and the officials that we spoke with, you know, because we couldn't just move in.
Right.
We had to ask permission. They had to get approved. And, you know, and one thing that I really am appreciative is not only the support that they gave us, but the ability to give us free reign. They were like, you know what, we'll trust you. You guys do it. You know, and it's been cool. It's been fun. And to feel that support and to see how, you know, you weren't in the meeting. I was in the meeting. You know, how supportive some of them were. They came up to me after the fact and were like, you know, we really believe in you guys. We trust you guys. We think you guys are doing something great. You know, you're representing the kingdom. You're representing the church. Keep going forward. Do your best. You know, things like that are encouraging, because I think that a lot of times, especially when recording, sometimes it kind of feels like you're speaking into the void, where you're kind of like just saying stuff and hoping that somebody grabs it and somebody's like listening to it. Yeah, we can see the numbers. Yes, we see where people are listening around this country and other countries as well. We see all that other stuff or whatever, but it is kind of like speaking into a void. But then when you have people around you that are supporting you, that are giving you that, you know, that encouragement that, you know, keep doing it. You know, we're hearing you. We're listening to you. You're doing a great job. I think it gives you that extra kick to start off the year right, especially with this whole new chapter in which we're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that it's not only like the space that we're occupying, but it's just everything else as far as like the equipment, new microphones. Like it was a big deal. And I think it goes to show, and it goes back to the idea of investing in things that you believe in and investing in things that you know is making a difference. Yeah. Right. And I think that, you know, we were very blessed and fortunate, like you said, to have a church that made that decision and believed in us, you know, where I know that there are just a lot of, you know, individuals or people out there who may struggle to kind of get that start. You know what I mean? And we know what that is, right? For a long time, we didn't have a space. We, you know, didn't have the best equipment. We didn't have all of the things that you should have, you know, to run a podcast. We were doing, you know, things as we went and learning and investing on our own. And we did that for the 3 years that, you know, we've been doing this. So it's great now to be able to, you know, have this opportunity and this blessing, but be able to also appreciate it and know that you've put in the work, right? And that you've tried. And I think a lot of times, you know, people may forget that, right? And they may forget that you can start right now with what you have. You can start, you know what I mean? And sometimes you won't have all the best equipment. You won't have all of the things that you want right from the start, but you have to start. Yeah. You know, you have to start somewhere. So again, shout out to, you know, the New Jerusalem Church, and shout out to our pastors who, you know, definitely blessed us, right? With this space and with just the opportunity to do this. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because as we have been talking about, you know, preparing the room and getting everything together, the equipment, a lot of things were happening. And when I say a lot of things were happening, I mean just all over the world, on the news and the Christian, you know, circle, just everywhere. It was so much that was happening that we just couldn't wait to address and talk about. So we wanted to talk about one of the things that, you know, was very, you know, on and popping a few weeks ago in the Christian circle, non-Christian circle, all over Twitter. It was top 5 trending for like a whole day. And it was the Mike Todd sermon illustration where he put spit on someone's face.
On his brother's face. Let's clear it up a bit, because that's very clickbait. On someone's face. A random hermano de la iglesia.
Yeah.
He picked that random. No, it was his brother who he did that to.
Yeah, and I remember seeing it trend on Twitter and wonder, like, what happened? Clicking on it, seeing like, oh no, right? Like, he spit on his face. Like, there's a video, he spit on his hand.
Yes.
Let's be clear. Spit on his hand and put it on his face, right? And again, watching it as a sermon illustration, this was, live streamed, to so many different people all over, the world, so many people watching. Like you said, it was his brother.
Yes.
And it wasn't like a 1 minute thing. It kind of like dragged on for a few minutes.
Yeah.
It was a few, I guess you could say, where he spit in his hand a few times.
Yeah.
He, shook it a little bit. Like, it was a lot happening.
Yes.
And, what was your reaction to seeing
listen,
that?
at the end of the day, the point of it was kind of like sometimes you have to get dirty. Sometimes, healing is messy. Blessings can be messy. Processes can be messy. And I get all of that. Trust and believe that I get it, because those are things that we have experienced, and we understand that things aren't always, like they say in Spanish, color de rosas. It's not always, pretty. It's not always easy. It's not always pleasant. There are processes that we go through in our Christian walk, in our personal life, that is difficult. And also I think it's important to say this wasn't the first time he did that exact illustration with his brother. But what I do think that kind of like was where it kind of went overboard was it wasn't done gracefully. I think that's the easiest way to put it. It wasn't done gracefully. Like you said, he spit in his hand multiple times. He kind of shook it up. He really hacked it out. Like it really came from deep within. Where when we see the story in the Bible, and we see when Jesus spit into the mud, and when he spit into the dirt, he made it into mud, and he put it on the blind man's eyes. It wasn't. I don't picture Jesus making a theatric out of it.
Yeah.
I don't picture him like making sure that you can hear all the way in the back of the multitude that he's spitting out this phlegm, to make this mud. And I think that's where Mike messed up.
Yeah.
Pastor Mike Todd messed up, which was that it was very extra. And I get it. We're living in the visual aid world, where we're trying to get things to hit and to trend and stuff like that. But when you make it extra, it kind of removes from the purpose of what you're trying to preach about, because nobody was talking about the idea of the fact that, healing can be messy, process can be messy. Everybody was talking about that was disgusting what he did.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like you said, I think he was aware of what he was doing. And I think oftentimes when you do illustrations like that, when you do, examples like that, you want it to hit and you want people to talk about it and you want it to be impactful. But I think oftentimes in wanting it to be all of those things, if you're not careful, it can go left, it can go south real quick. Yeah. Right. And I think, and he said this later on in his apology, which we'll get into in a bit. But he basically said it wasn't his intention to do that, right? Yeah. And it was always this idea of wanting to preach Jesus and for people to get to know Jesus. And unfortunately, when we are reading everything on Twitter, when you're seeing the comments, when you're seeing people, the focus was not Jesus. Yeah. He was definitely the focus of the situation. And just, again, everything happening with the pandemic, that was circulating, people saying that was irresponsible of him. Just the idea of what he did being gross in general was enough for people, so it was unfortunate because if this was a moment where he wanted individuals to see an example and just be ministered to by it or be impacted to the point where they're like, man, I get that. I think he missed it. This time around, we spoke on the pod actually, about a year ago, I believe, where he actually brought out the boat. Remember, in the middle of his sermon, and it was like there was water on the stage and all of that. I remember when that happened, and we spoke about the idea of creativity, is that necessary, and all of those things. I remember the backlash he received then because it came out that he had spent $1,000 and more to kind of make that sermon illustration, right? So it just seems like, again, he is the creative individual. He is the one that, you know, will go all out in trying to get people to really engulf themselves in the message, engulf themselves in the story.
Yeah.
But again, like all creatives, I think we need to have individuals around us where we bounce these things off of.
Yes.
Where it's like, you know, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? You know, I'm thinking of, you know, doing this type of illustration or incorporating this. Like, how would that come across?
Yeah,
you know?
and I do agree with that. I do think that, you know, anyone, when you're putting, especially in a church, and, you know, that's why you have directives, that's why you have board members, you have a creative, you should also have a creative team to bounce ideas off of. But I do think that the realization is that regardless of if he did it gracefully, regardless if he spent $2 on that boat, at the end of the day, someone is always going to criticize you. Someone's always going to have an issue. Someone's always going to have something to say. I think that is why it is important that that you always do everything with the right intention. You know, that you really understand that, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to do an illustration because I feel that this is what God wants me to do. He wants me to make it impactful. He wants me to make it visual because, like I said, we're living in the social media age where, you know, it really just takes a good 1 minute clip to get people invested and to receive the word. So you have to make sure that, you know what, am what I'm doing distracting from the message? Because I think that's really the focus is what we're putting together in this 1 minute clip or in this 10 minutes that we're going to spend in this 30-minute sermon. Is this going to remove the intention, or is this going to take attention away from the message that we're trying to preach? Because if it is, then you need to scrap that and do something else. But it's also, you know, it's a catch-22 because at the end of the day, someone's always going to have something to say, regardless.
And I think it's important to also note, I don't think it was his intention to cause for all of this to happen.
No.
As far as the negative backlash.
No.
I don't think he meant to trend on Twitter and the way he was trending, because as we were, and I was sending you some of the comments and some of the things, people were going in and people were saying things that again were disrespectful and rude and talking about him, his wife, his family, you know, and again, having nothing to do with the issue at hand.
The trolls. We've always spoken about the keyboard warriors.
Yeah, this was on TMZ. This was all over. I mean, local news had it. Like, it was a lot of people that, you know, were talking about this. And again, I don't think he woke up that day saying, today we're going to trend. Today, you know, people are going to be mad at us. There's going to be backlash. Do I think that he had good intention with what he was doing based off of everything else he's done and other illustrations? Absolutely. You know, and even hearing his heart afterwards. But again, like you said, I think it's important sometimes, especially as creative individuals, you need to take a step back and ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is my motivation? And like you said, will it draw attention away from the message? Right? Like, what's the goal in this moment? Is the goal to have, you know, a clip go viral, or is the goal to get people to really understand the message? Because at that point, a lot of people just saw that clip.
That was
they
it.
did not see the hour and 12-minute preaching that he uploaded, you know, and even in his apology, he said, go back and listen to the whole message. But unfortunately, like you said, with all the trolls, with all the people out there that just love drama and gossip and love the negative, you know, press and negative perspective on things, they just saw that one clip. They saw that one clip. They made their assumptions. They made, you know, whatever they chose to believe in that moment, that's what they did. And I think it's important to just know, again, as creatives, as preachers, teachers, whatever you do, there's always that fine line. There's always that fine line where if you have that hesitation, if you have that moment where you're questioning, it's probably for a reason. You know, and like you said, definitely go to someone, bounce, you know, ideas off with them and just see, like, you know, is this okay? What do you think about this? And, you know, that goes back to also having a strong circle of people around you that will keep you accountable and that will tell you, no, that's too much, and not just hype you up.
Yeah, you know, it was funny because I was thinking a couple of months ago, we had our big anniversary service. And we put together this mime for it, and in almost towards the end of it, in the middle of it, we did the whole confetti ball thing. And even with something like that, you know, great intentions, I think it came out great, not to toot our own horn. But, you know, there's so many things that can go left. Like, it could have hit somebody on the forehead. You know, somebody could have been taken out of the moment. Ay, Jesus, like, get scared because of everything. But, you know, we knew that it was because we wanted to really highlight a transition. There was a transition happening in the song. The mood was changing. We really wanted to get everybody hyped, and we did something like that. But that could have went left even with itself as well.
But I think it's also important to note, even in the process of creating that,
we did a whole bunch of like trials.
There was a whole
and
bunch of other stuff that we did. The
Yeah.
song was famous for.
Yes.
So we wanted to incorporate all the different elements. We had like a visual in the background as we
Yeah.
were miming. And then, the song says make way through the waters.
Yep.
So we wanted to really show emphasis on the waters.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know what? We should get water balloons.
Yeah.
Right? And we should at that point like crash the water balloons and just like make a splash. Like so people, and I remember we tried that a few times.
Yes.
We had different people, like you would sit on one side of the
Yeah.
church and another side of the church.
Yeah.
And every time we did it, something went wrong.
Yes.
Like one water balloon didn't break. It just flew. It hit you, hit somebody, hit the wall. Things
Knocked
were getting
over a light.
wet,
Yeah,
knocked
yeah.
over. Like it was a lot happening. So we had to make the decision in that moment to say, listen, in our minds, it was working. In our minds, there was splashes. There was the oceans were parting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we had to recognize, we don't have that budget, right, to create water to come out from the floor, all these different things, But again, we had to make the decision to say, listen, if we hit the wrong person or if water gets on someone's hair that they didn't want to get, their hair wet, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
So in order to not have that happen and distract and take away from what we're doing, let's just not do the water.
Yeah.
And we didn't.
We didn't. And I think that those are things that you have to do. Did we want to? Yes. We wanted to build a whole stage. We wanted to do a whole big shebang.
Right.
But because of, space or budget or whatever, we tried different alternatives. We could have, if we wanted to selfishly, we could have done it anyways and be like, well, if you get wet, too bad. But it would have definitely distracted from the moment. Even if it would have just taken one person out, it would have hit the wrong person on the head. They came that day with their hair freshly done and it messed it up. That's it. Like we distracted from the message that we were trying to do through the mime. So I think it was a good idea to strip that back. So, when you're doing stuff and you're putting stuff together, it's always great to shoot big. Think big, shoot big, most impactful. But then as you're putting it together, learn how to take 10 steps back and see the big picture. Because if the big picture is getting too messy or there's too many risk factors for it, where you feel like it's going to distract from the message, then you really do need to edit and take stuff out.
Yeah. And one thing I really appreciated from this whole experience, obviously when things like this happen, right, and people start trending and, people are canceling and throwing that word out and all this stuff, the person that's the victim in the situation, what do? They shut off their social media. They shut off their comments. They do all the things to kind of isolate themselves and keep themselves away from the fire in the situation. Yeah. The next day, I believe it was, he did issue an apology. He recorded a video and, he was very, transparent in the video as well, but he was himself. He kind of like threw some jokes out there and was like, when the spit hit the fan, and he basically was saying that it wasn't his intention to distract others from God's word or the message of Jesus, even with illustrations. Yeah. And he made it clear, I apologize for my example being too extreme and disgusting. I love everybody. Yeah. And he issued that apology. He could have taken a different route with this whole situation. He could have taken the route of just quitting and, people are too much. I can't take this and disappearing for 4 or 5 months. Yeah.
Or doubling down, like being like, no, you guys you need to grow tough skin, stop being babies. Like, he could have been that route as well. Yeah.
And, he just kind of chose the route to understand that, again, nothing should distract the message. Yeah. And even if it does or you feel like it does, what do you do to make it right? Yeah. You know what I mean? What do you do to make it right? And I think, even through all the years of just being at church and listening to so many different people and even just our experiences traveling to different churches and places, I think we've seen a handful of illustrations, good and bad. Yes. Like I've been in churches where, the preacher's doing this illustration, we'll call somebody up, we'll try to do something like, if they're talking about Moses and the burning bush, right? They'll be like, you come here. It's caught off guard by surprise. And we'll be like, take off your shoes. Yeah. And I remember vividly this happening where, a preacher told someone to take off their shoes to just be Moses in that instance. And it was like,
the ground is holy.
Because the ground is holy. The poor guy had the only holes in his socks. Oh, no. I mean, like it was beyond the hole where it was just like his whole 3 toes were out on one. Like it was bad. It was bad. And again, I know he was embarrassed and he didn't want to at first. But again, when you're under pressure,
and in front of everybody,
like, just do it in front of everybody. Yes. There was another illustration I saw somewhere else, and if this was happening during the pandemic, people would have freaked and he would have been canceled. Yeah. But basically, he was illustrating something and had a water bottle,
Oh,
drank
yes.
the
I've
water
seen this.
bottle, and then was trying to have like the other person drink from the water bottle, and it was like a whole thing. But again, in his mind, he's killing the sermon illustration. Like in his mind, he's like, I'm gonna make this come to life. People are gonna love it. They're gonna understand. And it's like, no one wants to drink from your water bottle when you're sweating and spitting everywhere, and like preacher mouth. Like we don't need that. You know what I mean? So again, we've seen a handful of things.
Yes. No, I mean, when you think about the water element, preachers, and I get it, they're trying to make a moment happen, but we've seen water things go left so many times. They're like spraying people in the audience, throwing water at them. It's just, trying to have like a Triple H moment. Like, if you've seen wrestling, when Triple H used to come out, and DMX, or not DMX, I forgot what the group was called or whatever, they used to come and go on the stage and then start spitting water at everybody because it was like an effect.
Right.
And some people will go buck if that's your flow or whatever, and then other people's kind of like, that's no. I got something in my eye because you decided to spit in it. I've seen people throw stuff, across the temple or whatever. Mike Cable, somebody brought a rock, like a mini boulder for an illustration, threw it, broke the floor. It's kind of like that, like, it kind of like distracts. And I get that, the intention may have been good. Like, I want to be impactful. Let me do something like, para que la gente be like astonished and like minister to, but it doesn't always pan out that way. But I think that in the flip side, we also have experienced good illustration.
Yeah.
I remember this years ago. I was at this event. It was like this youth event, and the preacher was speaking about the leaders in the church and how, we have to be so grateful for the leaders that we have. We have to be grateful for our pastors, because even though they may be going through their own mess, they're still there for you. Regardless of if they were having a bad day, if you call them, they're going to pick up, regardless of what personal situation they have going on in their life, they will get up and preach. You call them and say, Pastor, I was supposed to preach today, but, I'm not feeling it. My toe hurts. They're going to be like, all right, so then I'll cover for you. Or they get somebody to cover for you. And as he's going in and saying that we have to be like supportive of our preacher, of our pastors, our leaders, because you never know what they're going through, he starts to remove his blazer, and I think everybody's like familiar with this, especially like, in the Spanish realm, whatever, that once the preaching starts getting like hype, they start loosening up their ties, they start taking off their blazer. So nobody's thinking twice about it. But then you start to notice, because he's wearing a white button down, that it looks like he's bleeding. So he's speaking about how, you don't know what no one is going through. They could be up here preaching and giving you word and ministering to you while they themselves are going through something. And it was like very impactful, because it was a very great visual for you to be like, what, it's so true. In the same way that I came today with a need, in the same way that I came to church today because I have my own mess going on or whatever, the pastors and the leaders that are up there are also going through their things as well. And it's important, to be mindful of those things.
And I think it's also good to note that it doesn't really matter if it's, a sermon illustration. It doesn't matter if it's a teaching or preaching, regardless of whatever you're doing, you have to be careful, whenever you're in front of people, right? You have to be mindful of that. I remember, a skit that was done one time where it was this homeless man, right, that had entered the church, and, he just, again, had the full, appearance and look of someone who had no home, who was dirty and was just struggling in life and, real down. And, they did this skit back and forth. They had different people, representing like leaders or ministers or preachers, pastors that, would kind of pass by him and just ignore him. And I remember, and I was a kid when I saw this, this man kind of gets up and begins to talk. And he's talking to the congregation. And as he's talking about his situation. He's talking about what he's going through and, how all these different people are passing him by. And like your, illustration, he begins to kind of like take off his jacket and take off his beanie and take off all these things. And I remember, underneath all of that, he had this like white angelic outfit. And just the contrast of that to, what he had on before, was very impactful. And it was kind of the idea along with that verse that, there are some times that we have encountered angels, right? Or have ministered to angels and served angels and we haven't even noticed.
Yeah.
So it was this idea of like this homeless man, this whole time people were passing him by, not knowing who he really was, right? And again, that's an illustration or a sermon illustration, a skit that sticks with you,
Yeah.
and remembering remembering the gasp in the crowd, right? And remembering kind of the effect that it had on the people, you know, again, that's what you want. You
Yes.
know, when it's done the right way, when people are kind of, you know, more connected to the sermon and more connected to the message, they understand it more, they're clear on it. That's the goal.
Yeah, I think that the goal really is to get people to be reflective.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's not to shock them. It's not to make them laugh. You know, those are all things and elements that could be really good, that could be good. But I think that when you really get people to reflect and they have that moment of, oh, snap, you know, where do I find myself in that equation? You know, if we're using that, am I the homeless person that people are ignoring? Or am I the person that has ignored people? Am I the leader who's bleeding and nobody notices? Or am I the person who has no regard for our leaders and stuff like that? So when it gets you to like really sit back and reflect, I think that's really where like the gold mine is in those moments. It's not about the laughter. It's not about the shock factor. It's not about scaring people. It's really about getting them to like self-reflect and see where they land on the scale.
Yeah. And also like understanding that there's a time and a place for a lot of these things, right? I think we're living in a time and an age where we need to get people's attention, right? We need to captivate people. We need to gain their interest, their engagement. And I think that in doing that, we often can lose sight of, okay, but this is not like we're not like YouTube influencers. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're not like, you know, try to, you know, trend on TikTok or trend here and trend there. Like this is also a church, right?
Yes.
So it's understanding to the time and the place where maybe that idea that you have, or maybe, you know, that super creative out of the box thing may not really work in a church setting on a Sunday service, but it may be great for a youth service or a youth group service. It may be great for a children's service. It may be great for, you know, its own event and its own night, right? Where that can be done. Or just strictly online for
that's what I was
individuals
saying.
who, you know, want to watch online. And this could be done, you know, again, on YouTube or just so many different places. But again, it's having the awareness and having the idea that there is a time and a place for all of these things. And it's like, you know, in doing it the right way, executing it the right way. Because one of the worst things that can happen is having a great idea, right? Having all of the resources that are needed to execute the idea, you know, having the location, having everything set up, but because, again, it wasn't the right time, or because, you know, it was just too much, or because of that line that you felt you were teetering on, but just kept going anyway, the whole thing imploded and it was ruined. At the end of the day, it was a great idea. It was great. You know what I mean? You had everything there. Everything was right at your disposition. It was available to you. But it was that one thing that you knew or felt the whole time, you know, that you just kind of ignored.
Yeah, and I think it's also, because this has happened to me as well, where you practice something or you rehearse something a certain way, but in the day of or even in the moment, you also have to be sensitive to the spirit. And if you feel the inclination to switch something up, to change it up, to maybe you had this whole monologue ready and nope, the spirit is leading you somewhere else, to be sensitive to that and to do that as well. Because I have been in those moments where we've rehearsed for the last 3 months to do it a certain way, and in the heat of the moment, it's like, no, someone felt to do a little bit different. Now, this is not your moment, you know, for you to like to stand out because you want to be the star of the show. But there are moments where the Holy Spirit does move you. You know, whether it is because there's somebody in the audience that needs to hear a word said a certain way, or needs to hear a certain keyword, or needs to see something visually, because that's where their need is. Be sensitive to that as well. Don't be so stuck and holding the idea that no, this is how it has to be because this is how we did it. So the same way that you can rush and mess it up, in the same way that you can go with the wrong intention and mess it up, also the ability to not be flexible to maybe what God wants to do in that moment can mess it up as well.
Yeah, and when that happens, and let's say you fall into that idea and fall into that trap, similar to like what happened with Mike Todd, that you have the right attitude coming out of that, right? That, you know, if it was something that you knew all along that you shouldn't have done, that you knew that, you know, was your bad, then again, own that.
Yeah.
You know, and see how you can change for the better the next time. You know, I think the quitting idea is never good, right? Because regardless of what you do and how you do it, like you said, there will always be people that don't like it.
Yeah.
There will always be people that will have a problem with it, and you just don't want to give up because of that, right? Or because you made a mistake, because that will happen, right? But it's seeing, you know, this is what happened. I made this mistake. It didn't turn out the way I wanted to, the way, you know, we intended it to turn out. But how are we going to avoid this the next time? How are we going to make this better the next round? How is this going to impact even more people the next time around? Again, something that's negative and that goes viral isn't the only way to reach people. You know what I mean? And I think having that understanding as well, you know, will help in the situation, you know, that heart of repentance, but also how are we going to change? How are we going to be better the next time?
Yeah, and I think it's also, like you said, like how are we going to change? How are we going to make it better? And also understanding that if you feel like this is what God has called you to, then don't quit. You know, that means that, all right, if you feel like, you know, your niche is in doing illustrations and being visual and being that type of preacher or speaker, then you just know now how to navigate the situation better. Because even with Mike, you know, Pastor Mike Todd, that wasn't it. Like, it wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm done, I'm quitting, I'm just gonna stand there and talk. You know, they have this new series going on. You know, I don't remember the name of it.
The series is called Here Is Holy, and the following week after everything happened, he did another illustration with his brother again. And you know, this time it was, you know, where he washed his brother's feet. And kind of like, you know, the biblical idea about that, right? About servanthood, and you know how Jesus washed his disciples' feet, and that whole idea, you know, and it was a moment, again, almost like a redemption, you know what I mean? And a moment where, you know, he got to kind of like talk a little bit and talk about the situation as he was doing that act. And, you know, and even on his Instagram behind the scenes, they show a moment of them two kind of hugging and crying. And, you know, again, then these are individuals with real feelings, you know what I mean? So the brother went through it, you know what I mean? The same way Mike went through it, and his wife, and, you know, it was a lot there. But again, I think when your intentions are for good, you know, even when you make that mistake, or even when you mess up, there's still hope, right? And there's still redemption, there's still restoration, and you could still have that impact that you wanted to have from the beginning.
And it was still creative, because I think, you know, they have this thing where they're really doing like the undershots. So it's like they're standing on like a plexiglass or like a glass, and then they're shooting the thing from under, so you see his feet getting washed. So it's not like an overhead shot. It's really like an underhead shot. And, you know, it was still creative. It was simple, very simple.
Right.
You know, I don't think they blew the budget on this one thing. But I think that it was impactful. Unfortunately, did it trend the way that the other stuff trended? Absolutely not. It did not, because it wasn't anything too crazy. And, you know, I'm pretty sure people saw it. I'm pretty sure people were ministered by it.
And
I'm pretty sure that there are people that had a lot to say with the spitting fiasco that maybe even saw it and were like, you know what? Yeah, you know, he's redeemed in my eyes, but they weren't vocal about it. They kept that to themselves. And unfortunately, those are the things that are always going to happen, where when it's something negative, everybody is going to talk about it. Everybody's going to come out of the woodwork to talk about it. You do something great, it may not have the same impact. And it may feel like it doesn't have the same impact, but it definitely will have a great impact.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's remembering that a lot of times impact is not seen.
Yes.
You will not see the impact you have in people's lives. You won't see the good. You won't see, you know, you'll remember the hours that you put in, the preparation, the process, but a lot of times you won't see, you know, the result, you know, and you won't see the people that are ministered by what you do. So again, it's remembering that you need to have that right intention, and you need to trust that, you know, if that idea that you're trying to do is just not sitting right with you and God is leading you somewhere else, follow God's leading, because then the impact that will come from that will be even greater in what you actually desired and wanted. You know what I mean? And it will be way better than if you just went with whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and you know what? That's just the way that life is. Unfortunately, there is trial and error in everything that we do. You know, no one comes out of the gate killing it. And even if you did come out of the gate and you killed it your first time, your second time, you maybe mess up. And it's really about always checking your heart, checking your mind. What is the reason why I'm doing this? What's the purpose behind it? And trying to stay true to that. But because of our humanity, we may mess it up. Because of our humanity, our ego may get in the way. But when things like that happen, it's like you said, own up to it. ask for forgiveness to everybody that got offended, or ask for forgiveness with God, and keep it moving.
Yes. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in for another
Yes.
episode. We are back. So definitely hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening to us so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. We have guests coming up. We have some awesome conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to, follow us on all of our platforms at God Life Culture Podcast. So you can be notified when we drop a new episode.
Yes. So not only subscribe, not only like, but share. Be part of the family. Come on. Spread the word. You may think that your friend group is aware of us, and they're not. Send it to them anyways. Repost, reshare. Now Instagram has that new feature on the stories where you can like it. Do that as well. Like it as well. And let's just get it out there, because at the end of the day, our intention is not to be famous. Our intention is not trying to get. We're not trying to get deals. But Nike, if you are out there, I'm just playing. But we really just want to get the word out there and be of a blessing to other people. So thank you once again for tuning in to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.